Excellent connection, eh? All right, let's see. Very good. All right, let's see how this looks. Okay, no drop frame. All right, that looks pretty good. All right, let's see if we have. So I'm self. They're away. Greetings. All right, looks like we are live. Greetings. All right, looks like we are live. Greetings. All right. Okay, I'm going to check here to see how the stream is working. I'm going to enter something in chat, perhaps, see if you were receiving. Hopefully you guys can hear me well. This is a test stream. See if this, well, first of all, for two reasons. First, see whether this works better for than Twitch, because my Twitch streaming was kind of sketchy in terms of some of the video quality. And hey, Lynn, hey, Excessive One, thank you. Okay, so the issue that we've had historically with, or I've had with Twitch, is that when I would play games, um, there would be sort of this stuttering during the video. So you'd get a second or a fraction of a second that the video was smooth, and then you would have sort of this stutter for a fraction of a second, and then it would go back, and it was just constantly doing that. So I'm trying YouTube for two reasons. One is to see if that issue is resolved, but also because I haven't put out a video for over 2 weeks. Part of it, a big part of it, is a significant change in my role at work that's taking up a lot more time. But also, again, I was sort of grappling um, with the Commander rework video that I had started, and I realized that what I was going to produce was just stupidly long. So what I've decided I'm going to do differently, or at least try, is see if I can prepare a video during a stream. This also gives me a chance to get feedback and answer questions real time, and have that captured, and then I can immediately put it on my channel. So the videos would not be quite as sort of refined or structured necessarily as I would do with a traditional video, but it might be something that would scale better with my changing work situation and would still allow me to contribute effectively. Okay, so what I'm going to, thank you, Excessive One, I appreciate that. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to play, actually, I'll probably just play a co-op just to see, so the game's not too long, and you guys can tell me whether the playback is clear. Incidentally, Excessive, did you get, I didn't ping you that I was streaming. I assume you received an alert from YouTube that I had gone live. Is that true? I should probably also change my hours. Okay, terrific. Okay, great. I don't know if there's any way to see whether, all right, I'm not sure whether it's possible to see Mr. Lopez. And hey, Shadow Crockers. Yeah, thank you. Okay, terrific. I don't know what the latency is, and I don't know if there's a feature in YouTube like we have with Twitch where you can see your delay to the broadcaster. So let me play a really quick game. You guys tell me if the gameplay is smooth. Let's do something where, I don't know, a quick match with something. Probably play, I don't know, we can play Duke Cruiser. Here, let's just take the Hindi out. We'll just make it easy. All right. Mr. Robinson, greetings. You are up very late. It's, what? It's closing in on, what, 2 in the morning for you? So I apologize that I don't have my image up. I'm again, this right now, this is a test stream and experimentation, and if it works pretty well, then I'll add in the bells and whistles on the scenery with my image and other stuff going on. So 3 like are you like up because you can't possibly be up just to watch me? Um, so I don't know if you have a late night job or something. Or you're a permanent insomniac who literally does not sleep. Mr. Shaw, you are here as well. Well, you being here makes a little more sense because it's, you know, what, midday for you right now. So the key here, guys, again, for those who are just joining, is to tell me whether the stream quality, you're not seeing any stuttering in the video, the audio is clear, because if this works, then this may end up becoming the preferred platform for streaming over Twitch for the time being. Okay. Yeah, well, wait till I get some action. So one place where people would see stuttering is when I would go to binocular views. So let me try that. And then you guys tell me whether you're seeing stuttering while I zoom or zoom in or zoom out. Oh, it's 3 o'clock. Wait a minute, I thought you were... Oh, I guess, yeah, you're New Zealand. Sorry, I was thinking more a little further west than that. Yeah, so you guys tell me if there's a smoothest issue here. Looks like we are not going to get any action over here based on radio location. C is too... Yeah, so, yeah, great question, Tent. So I have... One of the mods I have from Aslan smooths the water. So that tends to be kind of the method of choice for a lot of players. Let me let these battleships draw the fire here. All right, my ping actually is not bad, actually. No stuttering. Excellent. That's very good news. Well, you know, the other thought I had on my issues earlier with Twitch may have partially been related to the Twitch servers and the performance of those platforms. It's also possible that, I don't know, maybe the latency on my account or on my internet server is fine. Okay, looking good so far. Okay, good. Good. Fires for everyone. Okay. Bricks. All good. All right. Well, that's certainly very encouraging. We already picked up 31 people. So that's great. Oops. All right. I thought I'd switch to more piercing. Is that gonna end them all? I don't know. All right. Well, we are just getting thousands of screaming fans showing up, so I'm flattered, guys. And gals. Sorry. Ooh, you didn't need those secondaries, did you, in North Carolina? Now, if I'm close enough to the North Carolina, my AP will actually disable our guns. But I have to be within probably a kilometer for that to work. All right, let me try it. Right, that works. Okay. What are we dealing with as far as another ship? Soyuz and they're on the other side of the map. All right. "75 secondary hits, guys. Battleship Hindenburg reconfirmed." In fact, we'll take a look at that after the at the end screens because they get the 1/4 pen, so they could actually get some real damage. Spotter here. Let's see if I can hit this guy. All right. So again, for those of you who have joined in the last, I don't know, probably 5 minutes or so before I started this game, I'm testing this to make sure that the video quality is good. But I'm also thinking this might, using YouTube streams might be a more efficient way for me to um, capture video and cover stuff that I would normally do through staged or planned videos. But with a change in my job situation and other things going on, producing new content has been a little bit challenging as of late. Except for my aim, I know. Thank you. Sorry, I just got that. Oh, see, I fluffed it again. All right, he's slowed. Is with a team kill. Yeah, I'm not going to do that because as a CC, that's it. That is a strict no-no. Oh, there we go. All right, good, 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 good. All right, it looks like that's working pretty well. All right, so folks, should we chat a little bit about the new Commander rework? Did we lose a couple of people? No. Oh yeah, we did. Okay. Do you guys want to talk about the Commander skills? Where is Günther Lütjen? Disappeared. Okay, great. All right. Thank you, Excessive. We peaked at 15 current play. Oh, we have 12 right now. I'm looking at the wrong number. So we peaked at 15. We're currently at 12. All right. So let me first say, arg. All right. Let me first say about the Commander skill rework. So my general opinion on this, like with any new major overhaul of a subsystem in the game, is we're essentially in a public beta testing period. There's no way for wargaming to fully validate the changes unless they get it um, into the public's hands. So I definitely expect that some things are going to change. And yes, Deadeye is probably the poster child of the problem areas. I don't have any information from Wargaming stating definitively if they're going to make any changes, other than they said they're going to keep an eye on what's going on. So I'm trying to look back at chat now and again just to make sure I'm catching any questions or comments that you have, or if anything's unclear. So my I think there's going to be some changes. And they will evolve over time. And recommended changes are also going to evolve to some extent. But the first thing I would say is don't panic about the changes, about this overall system. I know that Fin Damage and some other folks who follow me have raised concerns about why did Wargaming even do this, overhaul the Commander skill system to begin with. And to me, the short answer is that while it is good potentially for the user base in terms of enriching the product, I think they were probably the catalyst here could very well be things like submarines. So think about once submarines get here, they're going to have to devise a whole new set of skills, and trying to shoehorn that into the previous commander skill system was basically a non-starter. In fact, even the carrier skills under the old tree were pretty static for most carrier builds, with a few exceptions. Obviously, the German carriers could have secondary builds, and there were some variation, but not very wide. So I think Wargaming saw this as an opportunity to say, well, if we're going to introduce subs, let's say sometime this year, we're going to have to come up with a new skill system. We have to come up with some way to fit those in. And so, yeah, it has made the system obviously more complex. No, technically it didn't have to be changed, but I think for purposes of growth of the game, it was kind of a necessity. All right, let me go back and double check any comments. Do we find DDs more vulnerable than before? I don't think so, David. My personal take on this is that destroyers are actually fared pretty well. In fact, right now, destroyers are kind of becoming at least to some extent, my preferred class to play right now. I don't like the battleship meta right now, and we'll talk more about that, or I'll talk a little more about that shortly. Cruisers, to me, are kind of relegated to the long-range artillery cruisers because they are able to handle or manage the Deadeye meta a little easier than the short and mid-range. So think about the Atlantas and the Flints, obviously, but the Atlantas and some of the other shorter range cruisers now have to get much closer to different positions in order to be able to engage, and that just makes them more vulnerable. So I think the long-range artillery cruisers are probably faring a little better, and they're frankly the only ones that right now I'm going to play for the time being. So I don't think DDs have struggled too much. I think they can go spec into builds that people are comfortable with from the old system, and they can play them pretty well. Carriers definitely, in my mind, have kind of benefited from this because there's a broader variety of skills that can be brought to bear, and you can have some more specialized skills and possibly even some meme builds like around AA and things like that. All right, so again, don't panic. You can spec into, by and large, for most ships, you can spec into the builds that you're comfortable with. Obviously, some skills have changed in terms of how many points they cost. The names obviously have been changed as well to some extent. And there's also obviously a lot of new skills, especially the level 4 skills to provide some sort of specialized gameplay styles. So don't panic is the other aspect. The few things to keep in mind on the upgrade or on the update is the discounts and bonuses that we're getting right now. And most people are already aware of this. So today, through the end of the update, we can reset commanders for free. We can demount upgrades for free. And Wargaming provided most accounts with 500 free doubloons that they can then spend to retrain commanders, basically move them around on their tech tree ships if they wanted to, or you can just pocket the doubloons. And then there's also some combat missions that can earn you up to another 600 doubloons. Now I've already burned through those, so they're not going to show up on my list of combat missions, but there are, for folks that haven't gotten through them, there are some easy combat missions to earn up to 600 more doubloons so that you can move another potentially 12 commanders around from a retraining perspective. All right, let me come back and check notes here, comments here. Rework, good idea. Probably taking AFT light cruises could be revisited. Yeah, so great question, Excessive, on that. And I think, Wargaming already changed the Atlanta to basically give her the range that was equivalent to having AFT from prior to the rework. And they're going to monitor, in fact, they also changed the Colbert to give her different acceleration and deceleration characteristics, or basically buff them so that she can maneuver more effectively while having to play at closer range. Smolensk, honestly, my personal take is I don't think they're going to touch her. I think the fact that they took her out of circulation so early after she was available, I think is kind of a recognition that she was too strong. And this rework and the fact that you can't mount AFT essentially amounts to a nerf or an indirect nerf to her. And I think Wargaming will leave the Smolensk where she is. The Flint, I think, is, my personal take is I don't think she's tenable with an 11.1 range, even though she can take smoke. So I think if I were to pick one of those that needs to be revised, it would be the. Okay. Can we see those new ships? Yeah. Well, so FLFR, I'm going for this video. I'm going to concentrate mostly on the commander skill rework, because I've been dying to like get a video out. So let me cover that, and then I think what I'll do is I'll come back and I can do another video to talk about some of the new ships, because I can definitely show new ships in port, but I can't show gameplay right now. Okay, so enough rambling on some of the Flint and Atlanta stuff as well. So make sure that you're taking advantage of the resets that you can do. Also, you can do a one-time reset of all of your commanders in a single operation. So there's a website, and I can put a link to that website in the description of the video stream once after it's done, where for each account that you have, you can request Wargaming to reset all of your commanders. A lot of folks have probably already taken advantage of this. It certainly is less labor intensive than doing it manually, but it's a one-time operation. So if you do the reset like I have, and then you go and you make some changes to some of your commanders, you can't go back to that page and request another reset. It's a one-time option only, and it's only available during 0.10.0. Just to make the mechanics of that easier. And I would recommend that folks zero out their commanders, especially if they have a lot of them, because again, with builds changing and people still experimenting, and they're not going to get through playing all of their ships and getting a good sense for how they want the builds to go. You're going to want to come out of 0.10.0 with maximum flexibility and not having to spend a lot of doubloons or elite commander XP to reset commanders again after the update, because it's going to be much more expensive. All right, let me come back and check on questions here. Did the Odin get the base secondary buff? Yes, she did. Yeah, Hayden, she did get the buff. So her secondaries can be maxed out to 11.5 kilometers. So both tech tree and premium German battleships received the buff, yes. Some of the DD skills are great. Need a 21-point commander. Yeah, so again, let me get to talking about some of the builds. I think that if you have a lot of 19-point commanders like I have, you can spec into some very competent builds. And you'll be, in my opinion, you'll be materially as effective as, or those commanders will be as effective as they were under the old system. To me, the bigger sort of quote downside is that your 19-point commanders are no longer going to be sort of pulling in the large amount of elite commander XP. You have to push your commanders to 21 skill points. So that's a good transition to the next point I wanted to cover, which is from a process perspective, in addition to zeroing out your commanders, I would recommend that you start with the commanders and the ships that you play most often, are most comfortable with, and look to push those commanders to 21 skill points if you have either the free XP or the elite commander XP to do it. So for me personally, obviously, me being a German ship fan, I immediately pushed Günther Lütjens to 21 skill points as soon as the update came out. This allows me to spec into the widest variety of builds across all of the classes and try them out and see what I like and what I don't like. So in fact, I think a key aspect of this update is the fact that the historical and unique commanders will be even more useful because they have the buff talents and skills that can now be employed across all of the classes. One thing I should stress here, however, is that each commander, even though you can spec commanders to have skills across all classes, each commander can still only be trained or assigned to a single tech tree ship at a time. So for me, Günther Lütjens will remain the primary commander from my Hindenburg, but I can now spec into very good builds across all 4 classes and employ him on all of the German premiums and have very good, if not ideal builds, for all of the classes and all of the premium German ships that I have. So I don't happen to have any Battleship skills spec'd yet, but I can spec into a very good secondary build. We'll secondary builds right now are not very viable in random battles. It's a separate topic, but the point is that I can spec into very good builds and have him be very effective. Now, there are still going to be some ships like the Massachusetts or some other ships where specialized dedicated builds will be more useful than having sort of a multi-purpose commander. But by and large, this is where the unique and historical commanders will be most effective. But again, I can't, you still are restricted to having a single commander assigned to a single tech tree ship at any given time. All right, let me come back and check questions. All right, take care, Lynn. Thanks for stopping by. Have yourself a good evening. Let's see. Just checking the questions by the mighty Battleship. Okay. Let's see. I'm still playing the German BBs with secondary builds. Thoughts? Yeah, so excessive. Okay, so the growing consensus among a lot of my CC colleagues and other players in the game is that the Deadeye meta has kind of killed it in terms of secondary builds. To some extent, I agree, because we are, especially at the upper tiers, we are seeing a lot of Battleship players playing very far from objectives, very far from their traditional playing positions, which were already far enough back anyway. So like Thunders right now, that to me, they're being played criminally. They're just like, they're literally on the A line or the J line, and not engaging and just relying on their Deadeye skills. And so that has made pushing and secondary brawls, I think, harder to pull off. Now, there are battle modes like co-op, operations, arms race, clan brawls, where secondary builds are not only viable, they may actually be preferable. In fact, I took Günther Lütje and spec'd him into basically an all-in secondary build for the Bayern and Prinz Eitel Friedrich, and I'll do the same for the Scharnhorst, and took him into operations, and it was very effective. But I wouldn't recommend those types of builds necessarily for random. So kind of a long-winded answer, but excessive, if you can pull it off, great. I prefer secondary battles over the long-range sniping, but right now the consensus is that it's becoming more difficult to do. All right, looking at some other questions here. Mr. Lopez, you can only spec a commander into a class if you have one of those ships in your fleet. That's true. That's a great point. So you actually have to assign the commander to the ship of the class in order to even get access to speccing the skills. That's true. I don't know how big of an issue that is, because if you don't have a ship of that class, there isn't much value in speccing in the skills anyway, but it is a good point as far as the mechanics. Let's see, Mr. Robinson, I do like the commander recall. That's nice. Yeah, I can't see my Roma. Keep that eye on, though. Yeah, Roma might be a little more difficult because she's a little more shotgunny sometimes, but yeah, the recall commander skill is very nice. In fact, this is a Wargaming's implementation of a mod that I've been using for a long time, and now I can drop. So let me pull up German cruisers here for a second. So like if I go over to my Mainz, I can hit recall commander, and it will and this is now part of the standard game, and this will bring the commander directly over to the ship. So that is very cool. All right, so let me go to talk about some of the builds. Let me start with battleships. So let me go to a US battleships and pick up the words. Okay, so here's what I would do for essentially emulating a tank build from the old from 0.10.0, which is what I think most people are going to do, but I will incorporate Deadeye into it. So generally level 1, most players I expect would start with preventative maintenance. There are some other good choices in here, like Gunfeeder, which is the new name for expert loader. It performs the same function. Some people like incoming fire alert on their battleships. The emergency repair specialist reduces the cooldown on damage control and repair party. That's another good choice. I would not recommend pyrotechnician for any battleship build. It's pretty much a useless skill in my mind for the class. At level 2, usually most players I expect will take Grease the Gears. This is the new name for Expert Marksman. It works slightly differently from the Expert Marksman skill. It now improves turret traverse by a percentage rather than a fixed number of degrees per second. So generally what players will observe is that if your battleship has turret traverse that is faster than about 45 seconds for 180 degrees, this is actually a slight buff. If your turrets are slower, it's actually a slight nerf. Although, frankly, for ships like the Yamato and the Musashi, which have very slow turrets, I don't honestly know how much of a difference it's going to make. Players who are comfortable playing those battleships won't have too much issue, I don't think. All right. Hey, Greek, thanks for stopping by. I appreciate it. So at level 3, take Adrenaline Rush. And now it performs the same function. It actually also improves continuous AA damage, in addition to improving the reload time on your main battery and your primary weapons. It's a level 3 skill, but in my mind, it still remains arguably among the most valuable skills for any surface combat ship to take. Carriers can no longer take this skill. It's not part of their skill tree, but for everything else, this is pretty much a go-to, either as the first or second level 3 skill for any surface combat ship. All right, after that, you can pick up Deadeye. I would probably take Concealment Expert first to be able to better manage your engagements. Some players might prefer to take Concealment Expert, or I'm sorry, Fire Prevention instead. But so there's some trade-offs there. The reason to take Concealment Expert first, however, is that when you employ Deadeye, it will actually, the Concealment Expert will reduce your standard detection range, and therefore give you a larger area where Deadeye is in effect. And yes, there's been lots of requests, I think, to Wargaming asking them to provide some sort of visual UI indication that Deadeye is in effect or not in the heads-up display. So hopefully Wargaming will implement something there. But this would be like the core build if you were to take Deadeye in my mind. If you do not intend to take Deadeye, especially for some of the low and mid-tier battleships where the range isn't that good and the concealment isn't that good, even relative to the range, I would instead take Fire Prevention and Concealment Expert as your first 2 level 4 skills. And then again, you could choose to take Deadeye. If you don't want to do Deadeye, the other skill I would pick up is Emergency Repair Expert. There is no replacement for Superintendent for battleships. It does exist for destroyers and cruisers. Battleships get the Emergency Repair Expert, which gives them an extra charge of repair party and damage control for the Russian battleships, and it also extends the action time of those 2 consumables. So this is now an 18 skill point build, and this is very playable. This is a very effective build. After that, if you were to burn the last 3 points, Basis of Survivability is a good choice. Again, this performs entirely the same function that it did under the old tree, but it also reduces or improves the restoration time of incapacitated modules as well. So this would be, if you were going to go with a traditional tank build, this is it. This is your tank build. The only question that you have to decide is, do I bother to skip on Emergency Repair Expert and take Deadeye? And if I'm taking Deadeye, I'm playing farther from the objective. I'm not going to be as much in harm's way. I probably don't need the extra repair party charge. So this would be the alternate if you were to go into kind of a full-on Deadeye build. All right, let me stop here for a moment and check my questions. Let's see. Okay, I'm going back here. Okay, so Chris, glad you said this. A lot of people don't know this, and in my opinion, best thing about the rework. So, Chris, I'm sorry I missed the context of my comment that you agreed with. So, if you could put that into the comment to clarify, I can just make sure I understood you correctly. Um, David Lopez. Is the Pan European captain coming back for coal? I don't know. No official word yet, as far as I know. Um, the Normally what happens, or what we've seen with other commanders, is after about 6 months, after the 6 months after they are no longer available, we start seeing them show up again in the armory for coal. There's no official word yet from Wargaming about this, so once we get some confirmation, I can let folks know. The other thing to do is to look at to monitor the development blog, because that will be the first notice that or first public notice that what content is coming, and they will include their intentions to make a unique or historical commander available in the armory. Tent, what about having mines in the game? Yeah, there's enough complexity as it is. That's actually a good point. The one place where we had mines was in the Dunkirk operation, that we had a couple of years ago, and that was a very popular operation. And I think the mine mechanism there, or the mechanic there, was kind of well received for that particular mission, or for that particular operation. All right, so this is the Battleship build I would go with. Let me switch over to secondary builds. Oh, one other thing from a process perspective on selecting commander skills, a significant improvement to the UI. You can sort of mess around with the choices, but then you only have to press master once. So you can sort of pre-select your commander skills and then press master, and then that will actually lock you into that build. But until you do that, you can remove skills and move things around as you'd like. Before you hit the master button. The one thing I would say, however, one thing that kind of I've done once, and I've had some of my colleagues also do, is you'll make a selection and then you won't hit master and you'll just close the window, and it doesn't give you any warning. And so one time I went into battle with essentially a 0-point commander because I hadn't mastered the skills. So I have put in a request to Wargaming that when somebody chooses their skills, that the Wargaming tells them, if they try to close this without mastering, they ask you, do you want to master the skills? Just so you don't end up with that issue. Okay, let me go over to, actually, let me zero that out. Let me go over to Battleship builds, to secondary builds. And of course, we have to use a German battleship for that. Let me pick up my Pommern. Okay, so here's how I would start with secondary builds. So again, I would probably start with preventative maintenance, but some of these same rules apply for the level 1 skill. If there's something else here that you prefer based on your play style, anything else would be fine, other than, again, I think Pyrotechnician is pretty useless. The next skill to take at level 2 is either Grease the Gears or IFHE. So IFHE for battleships is now a level 2 skill. It performs the same function as it did under the old skill tree, but it's now a level 2 skill for battleships. So whether you take IFHE for a secondary build depends on the ship. So in general, I would say for upper tier French battleships, the answer would be yes. Because the preponderance of the 100 millimeter secondaries, they get very little alpha damage unless they have this skill. The Republic you could probably skip on, but for the Alsace and the Richelieu and the Jean Bart and so on, the Bourgogne, yes, it would be useful if you were going to spec into a secondary build. For the Ohio and Georgia, I would not, because they mostly see upper tier battleships, and IFHE doesn't buy them enough penetration benefits against other ships, mostly against some cruiser surfaces, but not much else. So for the Georgia and Ohio, I would not. For the Massachusetts, it's arguably useful because the IFHE will improve the penetration of the secondaries to 26 millimeters, which allows them to penetrate the bows and sterns of mid-tier battleships, meaning tier 6 and tier 7. So for the Massachusetts, it is arguably useful. And then for the German battleships, you definitely should not take IFHE for battleships where the secondaries are 128 millimeters or larger, which includes the Kurfürst, the Odin, and the Gneisenau. I also would not take IFHE on German battleships from tier 6 or below. Their secondaries already are going to penetrate most mid and lower tier surfaces with no issues. The German battleships that arguably can get some significant benefit are the Pommern, the Friedrich der Große, the Bismarck, and the Tirpitz, as well as the Scharnhorst, because they have 105 millimeter secondaries, which with the IFHE skill will now penetrate 32 millimeters. So for the Pommern, I would definitely take IFHE. All right, let me check for any questions here. Do you think the battleship... Okay, all right. I'll come back and answer that question here in a moment. Okay, so level 3 skill, Adrenaline Rush. And then level 4 skill, you're going to probably want to take... actually, before you even get to level 4, you probably want to max out your secondary battery range. So the long-range secondary battery shells skill is the version of AFT that increases the range by 20%. It's now a level 3 skill. And then after that, you would take up improved secondary battery aiming. And this is the replacement for the manual secondary skill from the previous skill tree. So this is now essentially a full-on secondary build from a skill perspective. And you're looking at, 13 skill points, which is actually cheaper by 1 point than a base secondary build for what we had prior to 10.0. Now, after this is also a highly non-survivable build. So you're definitely looking at also picking up Emergency Repair Expert to get the extra charge on the repair party, as well as fire prevention. So that these two are really key if you're going to be in secondary brawls to improve your survivability. So this is now 21 skill points. This is what I would spec into for a secondary build. Again, for battleships that should not take IFHE, you're probably going to be taking Grease the Gears instead. But otherwise, this would be a secondary build I would take. All right, one other skill here that some people have called out is the close quarter combat skill. Now, what this skill does is when there are, first thing is that it reduces the secondary battery reload time by 10%. But it also reduces the main battery reload time by 10% if there are detected opponents within your secondary battery range. Now, whether your secondaries can actually hit them, like if they're behind an island or something, doesn't matter. So long as there is a detected opponent within your secondary battery range, the buff to the main battery reload time kicks in. My issue with this skill for random battles is, first of all, it detracts too much from survivability. And secondly, consistent secondary engagements are not prevalent in random battles. They're kind of hit or miss. You'll have some games where you have great secondary battles. You have other games which have just terrible. And this is in my mind, too specialized for that game mode. However, this skill is definitely useful for operations, for co-op, if you play a lot of co-op battles, and that's where you like to do your secondary builds. It would probably be useful in arms race or clan brawls where you have smaller combat areas, and secondary engagements are essentially guaranteed. So that would be the place where I think this skill would be useful. But in regular random battles, I think this is too specialized and gives up too much in terms of survivability to be really useful. So again, I would take Emergency Repair Expert and fire prevention expert. All right, let me stop here and check for questions. So, David Robinson, do you think the battleship hanging at the back was already a thing and Deadeye just compounded it? And do us a 19 porter build for the Alaska. Yeah, okay. I'll get to the super cruisers here in a second. So good question. So so for players, coming back to the battleship players that were hanging at the back. So for battleship players that were already sort of backline campers, you're right. They're going to continue to do that anyway. You could argue, and I'm not unique in my opinion on this, you could argue that those players are potentially more effective because they're still hanging in the back like they were, but now hopefully their shots are a little more accurate, right? Because they're taking advantage of the Deadeye. How materially more effective they are, I don't know. The objection I have with this is that it has potentially encouraged players who haven't camped in the back to now start doing so, and even potentially playing even farther from the objective and from supporting allies that are, near caps or whatever. So I think it has harbored in an engagement style that's unhealthy for the game. And again, this is just my opinion. So I think it has exacerbated the problem. And it's also, like I said, made it more difficult to play, especially cruisers have been punished quite hard. And in fact, for my Hindenburg, I switched to the range upgrade in slot 6 because opponents were playing so far from the objective that I couldn't safely get within my 17.8 kilometer firing range with the standard range on any consistent basis, at least during early and sometimes mid game, and was only in late game where I could end up doing that. So I felt compelled to switch to to the range upgrade. All right, let me reset this. So that's a good question. And then I will get to cruisers here in a moment. There should be a commander tab. Yeah, that's actually a great idea, Tahir. So if you had something specific in mind, I can send it over to the wargaming folks and see what they have about that. But yeah, because one of the things that I have an issue with the new system is that it's hard to get to the reserve and to comb through all of your commanders. They basically have kind of removed the old reserve where you could screen through all of your commanders at once. And they now have a new UI for that. So, but yeah, that's a really good point. All right, let me move to any other battleship questions. Otherwise, I'll move to cruisers. Okay, so let me start. Cruisers are going to kind of get broken up here. And I'm going to kind of separate it between what I call long-range artillery cruisers and what I call close support cruisers, like the Royal Navy and the U.S. Navy cruisers. So for the long-range artillery cruisers, there are some really good choices. And in fact, in some ways, I think they've become more versatile with some of the new specialized skills. So first skill I would take for a cruiser would either be grease the gears, or I like taking gun feeder because especially for the heavy cruisers, I like to have the efficient toggle between shell types. The Des Moines doesn't really need it because her reload is so good. A lot of the light cruisers, you could argue, don't really need it. If you have a reload of 8 seconds or faster, you may not feel compelled to take this, and you might prefer to take grease the gears. But I like taking gun feeder. And then also some other good choices here are incoming fire alert, last stand, especially for some of the more fragile cruisers like the Royal Navy. That's another really good choice. At level 2, I would take priority target. Again, some players, like my colleague Lynn Wilkie, who was here earlier, he relies on his very good situational awareness. He doesn't feel compelled to take this. So you could pick up another skill. One of the new skills that I really like is the consumables enhancement skill that extends the action time of a number of consumables like radar and hydro, smoke generate. Well, smoke to me is less interesting, but engine boost. So this is actually a very good skill for cruisers that have sort of what I call high value consumables on their ship. But otherwise, I would typically take priority target. At level 3, for most ships, I would start with Adrenaline Rush. Another choice, especially for the cruisers that have repair party, would be to pick up Superintendent first to get the extra charge on the repair party. So that will depend on what you like and prefer, but as a general course of action, for cruisers that have repair party, I would pick up Superintendent first and then come back and get Adrenaline Rush later. After that, you're going to be taking typically Concealment. And then again, if for example, you decide to take Superintendent first and then Concealment, then I would come back and get Adrenaline Rush. But in any case, you're looking at either 10 or 13 skill points for a very competent build. Now let's get into some specialization. Lynn was still lurking. Okay, great. All right, so let's talk about some specialization here. IFHE is still available, and if you had ships that you liked playing that you took IFHE, by and large, I would still take IFHE. That might be your next choice for most, or especially light cruisers that fire HE. That might be your next choice. The other skills to look at would be heavy AP shells. These are only available to calibers 190 millimeters or larger. This increases the alpha on the AP shells by 5%. Cruisers that I think would definitely benefit from this, the Russian heavy cruisers and the US Navy heavy cruisers, because they both get the preferential pen angles on their AP, and this makes their AP even stronger. That would be a good choice. Another interesting choice is the heavy HE and SAP shells. This increases the alpha on both HE and SAP shells, and it's available to cruisers of any caliber or with any caliber. The downside is that for cruisers that have main battery calibers of 149 millimeters and larger, it increases the detection range of the ship by 15%. So there is a trade-off here to be made. And so depending upon your comfort with playing a ship with a larger detection range, this might be something that you may or may not be willing to do. There is a sort of a quasi-meme build, which I'll touch on here shortly, that does leverage this skill. Some of you may have seen it. I call it a damage farm build. Other people have called it like a jackass damage farmer, but I'll get to that soon enough. But that would be another choice. Another choice here, radio location. I really like that for the Royal Navy light cruisers and the US Navy light cruisers, because they are close support, and being able to triangulate the location of opponents can be very useful. But then the other skill to me that's very good, especially for the long-range artillery cruisers, or even potentially some of the shorter range cruisers, is top grade gunner. And what this does is it improves improves secondary battery reload time by 10%. That's, to me, is less interesting. But what's more important is the fact that it improves main battery reload time by 8% when there are detected opponents within your standard detection range. So a standard detection range incorporates Concealment Expert, the Concealment Systems upgrade, and your camouflage. And you can always find your, this is your standard concealment, what you see in the concealment tab here. And this makes cruisers, especially in late game, even more effective. So cruisers become increasingly more influential as games progress, and this skill is really good for that. All right. Okay, so another skill you could look at is Outnumbered. I have experimented with this. I'm not very enamored with it. What it does is it reduces dispersion of your main battery shells by 10%, and it improves your ship speed by 8%, but it only does that if there are more detected opponents within your main battery firing range than there are detected allies. Or, well, obviously your allies are detected, and my experience with this skill, after experimenting it for a while, I think it's too specialized. It's too situational, and you don't have really good control over its usage. It might be effective in clan battles where you have fewer opponents on the map, and the location of those opponents tend to be pretty well known based on battle play styles. And you have a long-range artillery cruiser like Hindenburg or Moskva or something, or a Stalingrad or something that knows it's going to be getting into a position where it is likely in an outnumbered situation a lot of the time. But otherwise, I think for random battles, this is too specialized, in my opinion. All right, so there are some other useful skills. You could also spec into a secondary into an AA build, but I think AA discussion requires a separate talk or a separate video. And again, I think some of these consumable skills are quite useful for cruisers, especially those that have high values consumables. All right, let me stop here for a moment, see what questions there are, because I am going to do an Alaska build. Which is better, heavy HE or heavy AP? AP. So VM player for the Alaska, U.S. Navy heavy cruisers get the preferential pen angles. The Alaska's penetration under AP is so good. It's absolutely a high value skill. So in fact, let me do an Alaska build right now, and so that I can answer that question. I'll also answer the question from David Robinson earlier. So let me go to my Alaska. Oops. Yes. All right. So here's how okay, so super cruisers. So I'm talking about the Alaskas, Kronstadt, Stalingrad, Eger, Siegfried, Azuma, Yoshino, etc. So these ships arguably are the ones that sort of did not benefit in some regards with the commander's skill rework, because you cannot spec into a tank build like we do with battleships. The fire prevention and the some of the other survivability skills that players often used with the supercruisers, because they do get 60-second fires. You can't take those anymore. Now there are some other mechanisms like the heavy AP shells that can make them more offensively capable, if if that sounds right. But so let me talk about what I think a build looks like there. Again, either grease the gears or gun feeder in my mind would be a good choice here to start with. The Alaska's guns are pretty fast for a super cruiser. I think they're 30 seconds. And that is with that. I have to check my upgrades, but I think that's with the main battery reload. Yeah, it is. And I might have the main battery modification 2 and upgrade in slot 4, or slot 3 rather. So I would probably start with gun feeder again, priority target, superintendent, pick up that extra charge of heal, get the concealment, get the adrenaline rush. So again, this is the core build for a cruiser. After that, I would definitely take heavy AP shells for an Alaska. And again, Petropavlovsk, Moskva, the Russian heavy cruisers, Stalingrad, definitely benefit. So I would do that. After that, I would take top grade gunner to improve the DPM of the ship. So this is not too just different from what I was showing with the Hindenburg. I want to do a Royal Navy build here in a moment, because I think the build is slightly different for those ships. But yeah, this would be a very good build for the Alaska. I have 1 skill point left. Again, I can pick up grease the gears. This to me is a very powerful build for the Alaska. So that's what I would do. And again, I think for the Stalingrad, Kronstadt, Azuma, those are very good. So again, for the Azuma and for the Yoshino, heavy AP shells is probably less interesting. Improving HE shell damage might be more useful because their HE is so good. That would be another logical choice for the Azuma and Yoshino. To me, Pyrotechnician is less interesting. Wargaming is clearly made sort of setting fires less effective for cruisers, and I think that's on purpose. But this would be a good alternative for one of the Japanese supercruisers. For the German supercruisers, the Eger and the Siegfried, you could take heavy AP shells I think that would be a good choice for that ship as well. All right, so Mr. Robinson, does this answer? Okay, great. Okay, good. Again, we don't have the survivability elements here, so you have to manage those ships a little more closely. Make sure that you're not extinguishing the first fire that's set on you, and employ some of the same practices that you would for a battleship. All right, so let me reset that. Let me go over to a Royal Navy light cruiser here because I think the build is potentially slightly different. Let me go. Where's my? Ooh, where is she here? Where's my Minotaur? Okay, so I have not bumped Cunningham to 21 skill point yet, but so I've been vacillating on who I push to 21 skill points. I have enough to push another commander, but I don't know if it's going to be him or somebody else. Okay, so for a Royal Navy light cruiser, I would probably start with, well, for all of the Royal Navy light cruisers other than the Minotaur, I would probably take Grease the Gears first. I wouldn't take it on the Minotaur. That's a waste. You could take Incoming Fire Alert. You could actually take Swift Fish to improve the torpedo speed on the Minotaur because she is quite powerful from a torpedo perspective. Or even Last Stand would be a great choice for a Royal Navy light cruiser. But let's start with Grease the Gears. Again, priority target. Pick up Superintendent, definitely useful for that. To get the extra heal. Pick up Concealment Expert. Get the Adrenaline Rush. So again, this is your core build. And then I would definitely go for radio location. The Royal Navy light cruisers work as arguably the best close support cruisers in the game. They have very high DPM, and they generally have very good concealment. And with smoke or potentially taking radar, they are again arguably among the best close support cruisers in the game. So being able to locate your closest opponent would be a good choice. And then after that, I would take, I have only 19 skill points, but if I had 4 more skill points, I would take Top Grade Gunner after that. Because again, if you're working close support to a cap and you have, like, say, an allied destroyer that detects an opposing destroyer that's within your standard detection range, now you've become even more of a machine gun to take out that destroyer. So that would be the other skill I would take if you had a 21 skill point captain. But even with 19 skill points, this is a great build. If you wanted to burn the other 2 skill points, I would take consumables enhancements. Extend the action time of your Hydro, radar, if you're running a radar cruiser like the Minotaur, Neptune, Edinburgh, that would be another great choice for a Royal Navy light cruiser. So this would be a good build as well. Okay, let me stop here. Brandon, thanks for stopping by. Can you post screenshots of these recommended builds after the stream? Yeah, so that's a great point, Brandon. What I was thinking to do instead is put up a list of links to the World of Warships fitting tool, where you can get a full view of the skills, the upgrades, signals that would make sense, and that's a little more consumable. But yes, definitely makes sense. Okay, Bryson. Okay, seems the OP Kleber, Smolon, Friesland, and Super Fun boats are even more OP. Yeah, let me get to destroyer builds here in a moment. Because for the gunboats, yeah, there can be some interesting builds for those. All right, thanks, Brandon. Okay, any other questions I missed? Let's see. Esau, hey, heavy AP concealment expert mitigate the penalty seems good in Alaska. Okay, yeah, I agree. I think that's a good point. Yep, agreed. Okay, good. Okay, so reset that. Go back to. All right, let's talk about destroyers. All right, I'm going to start with concealment destroyers because that's what the majority of them are. And again, in my opening comments, I know not everybody caught this. I personally think that destroyers in general have fared pretty well with the changes because concealment destroyers have the potential to become even more effective and gunboat destroyers haven't been nerfed. In fact, one of the skills actually can make them even stronger than they were. So let me start with a concealment destroyer. Let me go to, let me pick something out where I can put 21 skill points on there. Take my Z39. Okay. All right. So let me do it. Well, actually, I'll leave this up because I kind of like this build right now for my German destroyers. Okay, so for concealment destroyers, your first 4 skills are going to be preventative maintenance, last stand, survivability expert, and concealment expert. This is not much different from what we used to do. A lot of players, including myself, under the old system would take priority target instead of preventative maintenance, but under the new build structure, taking priority target as a level 2 skill to me is a little too much of an investment, and it kind of forces you to be smarter and be more aware of your situation as a concealment destroyer, to not take this. So I think these core 4 here. So again, preventative maintenance, last stand, survivability expert, and concealment expert. That's a great core build for a destroyer. After that, I would take either radiolocation or adrenaline rush next. I really like radiolocation. I know that Lynn Wilkie is, my colleague Lynn, he hates this skill with a passion. But I think for concealment destroyers, especially in random battles, this is a very useful skill to have. And again, definitely take Adrenaline Rush. Now that's going to put you at 18 skill points, or no, 17 skill points, I think, if I get the number right. Yeah. So then the next question is, where do you put the last 4? So it depends upon the ship. So for German crew, or for German destroyers or destroyers that have high value consumables, right? Repair party, radar, hydro, etc. I think superintendent is generally a good choice because it can, especially for late game situations, it can keep you effective in the game. For ships or for destroyers that aren't quite as or their consumable usage is not quite as important. So I'm thinking like U.S. Navy, the Japanese, that unless they have a heal. The other good choice is main battery and AA specialist. This is the equivalent of BFT. So let me drop this here for a second. Distribute. So here's my core 4. Pick up radio location. Main battery and AA specialist. This reduces the reload on your main battery by 5%. It's not the 10% buff that we got with BFT, but it also improves AA. So this is what I would do, like, for example, with a U.S. Navy destroyer to improve her AA, improve her gunboating. And I think it would also be useful for even potentially Japanese, other than Japanese gunboats. I think gunboat builds I'll cover here in a moment. Yeah, this would be a good build. But taking this out, and then picking up, at least for German destroyers, they definitely benefit from grease the gears, other than the Z52 and Z46. But this is a really good build for a lot of concealment destroyers. All right, let me talk about gunboats. Any questions on the concealment destroyers? When relies on crutches, the senses dull. Okay, yes. Yeah, I get it, Lynn. Okay. Bryson, I found full torp getting, since there's no longer a torp reload range penalty, is very viable. Okay, yeah, that's a great point. Okay, so let me go over to, let me do a torpedo-centric build. Yeah, that's a good point. Japan, let's see, pick up at a premium. Shima. Okay, so again, 19 points right now, and I'll talk about what it looks like for 21. So again, I would start with, again, the same core 4. Now, if you wanted to go with the torpedo-centric build, to me, the most valuable one to take is Fill the Tubes. This is the torpedo armament expert skill that reduces the reload time on the torpedoes by 10%. So the torpedo, or the Swift Fish skill, which increases torpedo speed, can be useful as well. If your torpedoes are already pretty quick, You know, if they're 65 plus knots, this may be less valuable, but that's up to you. Liquidator skill to me is useful for to increase the chance of flooding. Is can be useful. To me, it's more important for the destroyers that have uh, torpedoes with relatively low flooding chance. Flooding chance like the Germans. But for the Japanese, it's less compelling. But this would be a good torpedo build to start with. Again, you know, radio location can be useful. I would definitely take Adrenaline Rush for sure. And like I said, for all surface combat ships, this would be a good torpedo centric build if you wanted to do that. And if you really wanted to go all in, you could take Swiftfish and Liquidator as well. That would be another choice. I do need to talk about some of these other specialized skills for concealment destroyers. Actually, did I rush through that? Gearing. Gearing, yeah, if you in certain builds, right, for the 16.5 kilometer torpedoes, yeah, agreed. To me, in some ways, I prefer for the U.S. Navy destroyers to be more gunboating. Because to me, it's more valuable for a destroyer to be able to fight other destroyers. That's just my experience. But yeah, if you like running torpedo-centric builds, that's a great choice as well. Agreed. Let me go back to some of these other skills that I kind of glossed over for concealment destroyers. Okay, so I'm going to reset here. All right, so again, let me start with my core build. All right, so let me talk about some of these other level 4 skills that might be useful for a concealment destroyer. So I would definitely not suggest main battery and AA expert necessarily for a concealment build. This increases the range of the main battery and improves AA shell. This is, you know, this is the AFT equivalent of what we had. Swift and silence is a skill that some players might like to have for a concealment destroyer. It improves a ship's speed by 8%, which is the effect of what the standard engine boost does. But it's always in effect so long as your destroyer is not detected. The downside is that it reduces main battery reload time. And for me personally, and again, the way that I like to play destroyers, and I think it's very important that destroyers be able to fight other destroyers, reducing the main battery reload time to me is not an acceptable trade-off. But that's me personally. There are going to be plenty of players that disagree with me, and that's fine. And that makes sense. And, you know, improving their ship speed, they may be willing to take that on. So Swift and Silence could be very effective for players that like maintaining, you know, their concealment and being able to move around the map more efficiently. So that's another interesting choice for a concealment build. The other skill that to me is useful for a concealment destroyer is Dazzle. And what this skill does is that when your ship gets detected, sorry, let me say this clearly. When your ship gets detected, for the first 15 seconds after it's been detected, shells fired upon you, the dispersion of the shells increases by 20%. So basically, it's like the shells just go all over the place. And I've definitely experienced fighting other destroyers that have this skill. Because I'm going to try to fight a destroyer and my shells are going all over the place. And I'm like, is there something wrong with my aiming or what's going on? And I realize, okay, this player must have Dazzle. And that's throwing it off. So again, for concealment destroyers, if you like the situation where you want to, you know, sort of protect yourself and you're unexpectedly detected by another destroyer or radar or hydro or something like that, or planes, this could be a very useful skill as well. So that's another choice for a concealment destroyer. Dazzle could also arguably be useful for French destroyers if they like to run sort of ambush builds where they suddenly show up out of nowhere and they only need maybe 15 seconds to cut down another destroyer, and they can have opponents will have difficulty firing upon them. So that could be another choice. But let me get to gunboat builds here in a moment. So let me stop there, check for any questions. My border collie is looking behind the Galaxy tab to see where you're hiding. What? Okay, David. I don't get that comment, but all right. What's my opinion on Dazzle, Brandon? Hopefully, my question answered there. Okay. All right. So Dazzle definitely could be useful for concealment destroyer builds. I don't know that I would trade it off for radio location, but maybe I'm too comfortable with radio location. I don't know. All right, let me go. Let me talk about gunboat builds. Let's go with. Let me go with Battleship Tashkent here. All right. All right. So let me redistribute this. Okay. So gunboat builds. So Russian for sure. A lot of French. So French gunboats. Some players like to run full concealment and sort of be the surprise ambush playstyle. Others like to do more of the run and gun playstyle that the Russian destroyers have. So I can touch on both. So for Russian destroyers for sure, or for French destroyers that want to play the go fast and pew pew play style. Again, preventative maintenance, last stand, survivability expert, and then pick up main battery and AA expert. This increases the range of your guns, and gets it out. Well, the French destroyers may not need this, but the Russian ones definitely do. And this is the equivalent of AFT. And then after that, I would probably take up Adrenaline Rush. And you could either go with main battery AA specialist, which improves your reload by 10% or 5%, or the skill that to me really defines the play style is Fearless Brawler. This is clearly aimed at go fast and pew pew destroyer play styles. You give up concealment by 5%, so your detection range increases, but you don't care because you're going to be detected most of the time anyway. And it improves your main battery reload time when you are detected by 10%. But if you're in a destroyer like a Tashkent or a Kiev or a Leningrad or Khabarovsk or something like that, you're detected all the time anyway. You don't care, right? You're like, yeah, I'm detected, and and I get a free reload boost by just being detected anyway. So this to me is kind of a good base build. After that, the question would be, what do you take next? Superintendent is a good choice to get the extra heal. Again, this is a 19 skill point commander, so I'd have to get 2 more. I have 2 more skill points to get potentially. Superintendent's a good choice. Another choice is IFHE. I like running it on the tier 8 and higher Russian gunboats. I would not recommend it for the French. I don't think that they need it. The Japanese destroyers can definitely benefit from this, but this would be another good skill choice. But the build that I'm running right now for 19 skill points is this for the Tashkent and Kiev and Khabarovsk. For the Minsk, or for the tier 7 and lower, I generally don't take IFHE. I take the main battery and AA specialist. All right, check for questions here. Oh, okay, got it. Okay, now I get it. Okay, cool. All right, let me do a French gunboat build here. I don't have too many French gunboats, do I? To le terrible. Oh, I needed to get a different commander on here. Grab. All right, so French. You could run the same build other than IFHE. So you could do this. For a French gunboat. The tier 9 and tier 10, so the Mogador and the Kleber, they probably don't need to take main battery and AA expert because they can mount the range upgrade in slot 6. I would probably take this superintendent. And again, I don't think they need IFHE. You could take superintendent if you wanted to get the extra charge on the consumables. But honestly, the if you had 21 skill points, I think Dazzle would be a good choice again for the ambush cases, or a concealment would be another good choice to allow you to move around and to do the ambush attacks on the opposing destroyers. So that's what I might do for French. All right, let me do one more here on the Japanese. Let me know if I'm rushing. I'm going too quickly here. I'll just do a quick time check. We are... How far? I don't have a... I don't see the amount of time here I've been spending. Oh, we've been in this. This is over an hour and a half. All right. Okay. This is... See, even I was going to do a video and it was going to be over an hour anyway. Okay. Let me do Japanese. Let me take the Kidda here. All right. So Japanese gunboat destroyer is going to need to max out on concealment. Generally anyway. Maybe you take Fearless Brawler, but you have to be willing to give up the detection range. But this definitely makes you a more effective gunboat for the Japanese. But you definitely are going to want to take the concealment. Most Japanese gunboat destroyers will take IFHE at the upper tiers to get their shells to penetrate 32 millimeters. Adrenaline Rush, again, also kind of a prerequisite. But I would take, if I had the 2 more skill points, I would pick up Fearless. I might pick up Fearless Brawler. Or you could run radio location, or you could improve your range with main battery and AA expert. So those are all good choices. Dazzle, maybe. The key thing is to experiment and see what works for you. But this would be kind of the core of a Japanese gunboat destroyer build, in my opinion. All right, just checking here. No more questions. Okay, great. All right, so carriers, I'm not going to touch right now. I don't have enough personal experience with carrier gameplay to feel like I can offer a really competent recommendation. So I'm probably going to come up with some references to some of my CC colleagues who can make some general recommendations. I will, however, make an observation about one of the skills that I would recommend that you not take, because it's broken. And I don't mean broken like as in it makes the ship too strong. It's broken as in it basically gives up too much for the capability. So let me just do a quick build here. Okay. The skill in question here is Hidden Menace. And what this skill is intended to do is to allow your it reduces the detection on your planes and your ships, specifically the ship, and improves the reload time of damage control party on the planes. And so the idea is to allow the carrier to operate closer to the battle areas and remain undetected, and potentially be able to theoretically cycle its attacks more efficiently, etc., etc. The problem with this skill, however, is that it reduces the return, or it increases the, it reduces the speed, I should say, of the planes as they are returning to the aircraft carrier after their attack. So if you recall the planes or whatever. And the issue with that element is the planes remain in AA longer than you want them to. And so what I'm observing from my colleagues and other players is that they basically are just losing planes way too easily. So they finish whatever last attack they have, and they do a recall of the planes, and then they lose the rest of the squadron because the planes are slow and they remain in AA too long after the attack. And it basically, right now, this skill is not recommended for any carrier at all. But again, I don't want to get into too much into carrier builds, because I'm going to want to defer to somebody who is more knowledgeable in this area than I am for such a build. All right, I need to stop there. Check questions. They nerfed Yu Yang into ground. Um, Radar gun combo, then Smolond. I would rather we release a ship underpowered and then slowly buff than a premium they can't buff. Okay, so Bryson, that's a great point. In fact, that deserves its own video and commentary. But in my, just kind of in brief, my opinion right now is that, and there's nothing that Wargaming's told me, so this is just my personal opinion. It kind of feels like with a lot of the newer content that they're coming out with, whether that's premium or tech tree, is they are kind of underplaying or underspecking the ships a little bit so that they have some flexibility to buff them, because obviously people aren't going to reject buffs, but they have bigger issues with nerfing. So for example, the Belfast 43, which has an uncharacteristically long reload for a light cruiser at tier 8, she has a 10.5-second reload on her guns, which is like basically heavy cruiser caliber reload levels. So, in fact, Wargaming just announced that she's going to get a buff for, I think they're targeting for 0.10.1, that she will get an extra charge of her smoke. So, again, I kind of read that in the last 6 months or so, maybe a little longer than that, Wargaming has kind of been more conservative in the introduction or the capabilities of ships, and then that gives them some flexibility to buff them without without necessarily introducing something that's too strong and then realize they needed to nerf it. That's just kind of my take on it, but yeah, that's a really good point. IJN gunboats shouldn't take Fearless. Okay, yeah, Lynn, understood. But again, you can turn a ship into a bigger, have a higher DPM anyway. Yeah, can't nerf. Well, okay, so yeah, Bryson, the argument about they can't nerf premiums, that's, well, as a matter of good faith, they have to be more careful about it. That's true. But the hard reality is, and this is what we all sign up for in the end user license agreement, is Wargaming owns everything. None of this is ours, right? We're renting essentially the access to the game, and they can change ships at any time, premium or otherwise. That's totally their prerogative. But obviously they're gonna really annoy the player base if they're making nerfs to things where people spent money to have a particular game experience. But it is within the end user license agreement for them to make a nerf if they want to. But they obviously have to be more careful about it. All right, so great question. Ergumo has such a low reload anyway. Yeah, that's fair point, Len, regarding Fearless Brawler. Yeah, I probably wouldn't take Fearless Brawler. I probably would just do the concealment, take the I might take the range, depending upon how comfortable I am with the ballistics, but that's a good point as well. All right, so let me stop there because we went through a lot, and I'm going to have to check my notes later to see if there was anything I didn't cover from the script that I prepared or the commentary I prepared for the original video. So hopefully this was useful. We have gone, well, we are just, like I said, went way long in this video. Yeah, we're almost an hour and a half in. Any other questions, folks, that you'd like to go over? All right, so I think I'm going to wrap it up here. This looks like this was a successful experiment. And if I'm able to, what I'm thinking is I can do more videos like this using the stream method. Obviously, the videos themselves won't be as polished, but it or at least might allow me to get content out more efficiently, and therefore I can sort of maintain a better pace on the content and not have these like 2-week breaks because my job got busy. But hopefully you guys found the information here useful. Let's see. I so agree on the perennial ships. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good point, David. Good point. Okay. I think we're going to wrap it up. Thanks very much, everybody, for stopping by. I'm really flattered that you guys got the alert and you jumped right on. That's a good sign that people are seeing that I'm getting on. And I don't have a set scheduled yet. This again was an experiment, but it turned out to be a successful one. I wish everybody a great rest of the day or evening, depending upon where you are in the world, and have a great weekend. I hope I will be on. And maybe I will make it a more structured stream for the weekends when I have a little more time flexibility. And we'll be doing that here on YouTube rather than going through Twitch. All right, so thanks much again, everybody. Have yourself a great time, and we will catch you later.